Welcome to the Deacs.AI podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. I'm Michael Ferrari.
I'm Ryan Scholl.
Please join us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time.
2025 was a year full of just amazing guests and conversations on the Deacs.AI podcast. So this week, let's continue with part 2 of some of Ryan and I's favorite discussions involving artificial intelligence. When ChatGPT first arrived in late 2022, it felt like a moment you don't forget where you are. For many in education, the first instinct was to test the fences to see if the tools could truly handle the assignments we've spent years perfecting.
Yeah, so in this first segment, Amy Slack, Betsy Barry, Adam Friedman, and Fred Salisbury take us back to those initial red team moments. They share the scary and amazing realizations that occurred when AI didn't just pass their exams, but eventually mastered them with advanced reasoning. It was a wake-up call that proved everything in higher education was about to change.
I was at the Carolinas College and I had a faculty member who said the same thing. Like, I think this student cheated on their nurse care plan or whatever. And I was like, we can't prove it. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Like, it was very weird. So I was like, all right, I want to try. So I signed up for a ChatGPT account and I literally took this teacher's assignment, dropped it into ChatGPT and was like, all right, can it do it? Oh my God, it did it. Like I have to prove if they're doing it or not, right? Like, that's half of being like IT support when it comes to education is, can they really do this or not? Yeah. It was bad. I remember I was like, I don't even know how to like talk to this faculty member because she's just gonna cry, right? Like, I was like, I can't even show her this. Like, I was dumbfounded. And then I immediately was like, all right, how smart is it? Because I'm not a nurse.
I mean, it is interesting that in higher ed, at least, a lot of the people who were first engaged with this were teaching centers. Because you might think, well, it's technology, so it should be IT folks. But I think it was faculty very quickly realizing, this is going to change how we teach. And so it's not an accident that most of the first things written about AI in the Atlantic or the New York Times, et cetera, were about the cheating apocalypse, or what's going to, what's going to happen if this this tool can write papers, how is that going to change school?
It's one of those moments you don't forget where you were. And I was in the kitchen and he comes downstairs and he's like, Dad, you got to check this thing out called ChatGPT. And I'm like, what? I'd never heard of it. And this is in December of 22. And I'm like, what? And he's like, ask you to write an essay on the causes of the American Civil War. He told me to do that because he knows I'm a social studies teacher. So I'm like, sure, sounds good, whatever. I was like, come on, dude. Like, I wasn't like, he's not really kind of person to like lie to you, but I'm like, come on. Because I'm the causes of the American Civil War. I was like, whoa, that's pretty good.
And this was still GPT 3, 3.5, something like that.
I think it was 3 because didn't you have to pay for something like that? Anyway, so I'm cheap, so I wasn't doing that. But I was playing with that original, and I was like, this is actually like scary good. Yeah, like this is like scary, and obviously this is like might as well have been like when the dinosaurs were on the earth compared to what it is now, right? And I was like, whoa, this is amazing.
Yeah, last July, not even a year ago, I actually had the thought of, what if I can't solve my exam? Part of this was the thought of, well, are all my students going to be able to cheat on all their homeworks forever and ever now? And so I just gave it my final exam. And now I will say it required a lot of extra prompting. When I first gave it to it, it did not finish the exam. I had to say, well, you did not finish problems 1 and 5. You're not showing very much work. I had to give a lot of prompting. But at the end, it was exactly at the class average for the final, which is honestly pretty good,
Which model were you using?
It was whatever was the best. It was a paid model. Whatever was the default paid model in July 2024.
And this was ChatGPT, I think, right?
Yes, ChatGPT. Yeah. I'm not sure what model that would be. Probably O2, I'm guessing, but that might not be right. Then last September, I gave it the exact same exam, and it scored a 96%, which is a pretty substantial improvement. And it didn't require extra prompting. It did misread equations for one problem, which is why it lost some points here and there. And it did the worst on sort of a problem that required I have a set of problems where they're basically, you have to say if something's true or false, then prove that if it's true, give a counterexample if it's false. That still seems to be where ChatGPT does the worst. And so I gave two different models. I used O3 and let's see, what's the other model? O3 and 4.0. Okay. So ChatGPT 4.0 got a 95%. So basically same as last September. Okay. It did, and and the only thing it messed up was were on the true false section, and the give proof or counterexample. That's the only thing where I had problems with. Then I gave it to O3, which despite that it's 3, not 4, is actually the use of advanced reasoning modeling. It got 100%.
As we've just heard, especially from Fred's story, that initial shock quickly turned into a beautiful question. How do we harness this power for teaching? It wasn't long before faculty realized that AI could be a partner in creativity, generating entire syllabi in seconds or acting as a co-learner that helps explain complex concepts in simpler terms.
Joining us to discuss this pivot are Adam Friedman, Betsy Berry, Amy Slack, Jason Fanning, and Sarah Parsons. They explore how moving towards transparency and modeling the use of AI can empower students, from setting clear expectations to encouraging students to cite their sources. These educators are showing us that AI isn't just a shortcut, it's a way to enhance what we've already built.
So I was like, well, then how do we harness this? Like, this is here. So how are we going to harness this for teaching? Because it kind of makes the whole idea of a lot of what we do obsolete in terms of like, if you can get an essay.
So very quickly, teaching centers had to get engaged. But personally, what happened for me was, it was actually in November of 22 that I first learned about it. So it's now been 2.5 years. So it was before we went home for winter break. One of my colleagues in the library, Kyle Denlinger, who, if you're listening and you're a Wake person, you know Kyle. He's an open education librarian and digital pedagogy librarian. He sent just a GChat to everyone in the faculty comments that said, look at this, look what I made with this new tool, ChatGPT, and it was an entire syllabus. So it wasn't like, a lot of people get the first taste of like, oh, just ask it a quick question. Yeah. He decided to go big. Well, what was crazy about it was not only was it a whole syllabus, it was like a unique syllabus in a very niche. It wasn't like intro to biology. Mm-hmm. It was critical library pedagogy. And it had books that were correct that you should use in that class. And it had assignments and it had learning outcomes and it had a schedule. And I just remember stopping and thinking, oh boy. And we've got I got to pay attention to this.
Like, I don't know how legit this is. So then I plugged in like things as a chemistry teacher that I was like, I'm the expert on this. I'll know if it's right or not. And oh my God, it like blew me away. I was like, I don't know how I teach with this now. Like, this gives them all the answers. And it's not like you can be like, show your work, because it could tell them how to show their work.
And, a thing you learn there and then really was reinforced teaching college students is treating people like adults and communicating clearly about expectations goes a really long way, and setting expectations early. It's been challenging in the AI era for some reasons we could talk about later on. But as far as my kind of acceptable use policy, I do let them know my own view on things, and because I do want them to have the perspective that, like, if they care about the environment and other stuff, that they should, act according to their values. When it comes to learning, I think a place for these, I like features like, re-explain this to me, and, as if I'm a 7th grader, whatever, very basic prompting things. I want to understand a concept. And my rule there is that, co-learn with these things if that's what you'd like to do, and then bring it back to me so I can check that what you got out of it is accurate.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I'm still learning a lot to your point. Yeah. So even the changes I've made this semester, I've already got ideas for next semester. How can I make this better? But one thing I'd say first is my policies are more lax now, because initially I thought, I don't want to just throw the students in and say, yeah, you can use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever tool you want. And so at first I was hesitant, but now I want students to use the tool. It's critical that they know how to use it, especially effectively. And with an intro class, I find that's even harder because a lot of students come in not knowing much, they're intimidated, they're overwhelmed. And so they think, what's the quickest, easiest way I can get help? And so a tool like ChatGPT is great, But we have to caution students and ourselves not to over rely on such a tool. And so in my classes, I have a more relaxed policy now that says you can use the tools as long as you cite your sources and as long as you're not just copying and pasting straight from, whatever tool it is that you're using. And also in the assignments that I give, a lot of times I ask students to try things on their own first without using the tools, just to kind of gauge their level of understanding. And then I either add an extra part to the assignment where I want them to see what the tool would come up with, like what it generates, and compare that to what they were able to do, or to enhance what they've already built. So, which I prefer that type of assignment, because it's really amazing. And I've gotten some cool feedback from students about once they've built a program themselves, and then they add something onto it with ChatGPT or Gemini. It's like, oh, I can see how this tool is here to enhance what I've already done, but I still have a solid understanding of like what can I do myself before I resort to using the tool.
It needs to be modeled, right? It needs to be talked about. It needs to be as common as saying, I need to Google that, right? It literally has to become a part of the everyday conversation, and transparency around it. Like any of my colleagues will tell you, they know I use AI, right? Like they understand that if they get an email from me, AI helped write it. They understand that if, like, for example, the podcast discussion document that I shared with you, AI helped me write that, right? Like it's full transparency.
So part of our job as instructors is to actually acknowledge that. So when we share our policies, to actually acknowledge that
Or
this
guidelines.
is, or guidelines, yes, right, fair enough. Well, I will have a policy in my class. In my class, I will have a policy. And to explain, and to acknowledge this is going to be different than in other classes. And so let's talk about, but I also think, and part of being a good teacher is to not just have a policy, but to explain why.
Yep.
And I think if you explain why, that can help the students navigate the differences. Because they can say, oh, in this class, the reason it's different is because there's a different goal here.
I don't know about you, Michael, but I hate to struggle. Unfortunately, with learning, the struggle is what produces the learning. It's been around for a while though, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the struggle is specifically what's stuck out the most to me. And I'm honestly a fan of the struggle. That's what's really helped hammer home solutions to problems, or help me get over hurdles that I've had that I just, for whatever reason, had trouble wrapping my mind around.
It seems like these professors are telling us that the struggle is what produces the learning.
Yeah, as we embrace these tools, we also have to protect the heart of learning. And there's this profound idea that the learning happens through the suffering, or at least through the healthy adversity of wrestling with different difficult concepts.
In this next segment, Shannon McKean, William Cochran, Amanda Kaufman, Betsy Barry, Carter Smith, Jason Fanning, Tobias Flattery, and Jed McCosco all dive into the philosophy of the mind. They discuss why writing is actually a mode of thinking, and why we must re-embrace slow reflection. In an era of instant AI summaries, it's actually an uplifting reminder that our intellectual growth is a journey worth taking the long way.
So I think one of the things that I say a lot in my classes, I think students get tired of hearing it, I may even mention it in the AI fluency, is that, you should use AI to stretch your capabilities, not shrink your effort. If you're just using it to shrink your effort, then I worry you're not learning.
I think that learning happens through suffering, which sounds kind of bad. But I think that we learn a lot through adversity and having to overcome adversity. If you want to know the truth, I prefer the Greek.
Okay.
Yeah, which is pathe mathos.
Okay.
It comes from an Aeschylus play, the Agamemnon. And it's talking about how wisdom comes to mortals, and he says that it's through suffering, that learning comes through suffering. It comes through struggle, if you don't like the suffering language. I think that one of the dangers of AI is that it makes things so easy for students. Like they can just plug and play, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to set up systems for content delivery for them, they should be designed in such ways that still get them to struggle to understand concepts. And you can use AI to do that. You can use AI to test you, to get you to explain certain concepts, to help reinforce your learning in different areas. But then it comes down to whether the student's willing and able to to take that on themselves, whether they have the motivation to engage in that struggle for their own betterment.
Recommendations right now are to teach students to lateral read, which basically means like if you find something online and you want to verify whether or not it's true, what you basically need to do is like open up basically new tabs like laterally across your browser bar and, you know, look up if there's like a Wikipedia article that tells you like what the source is, or, you know, look and see if you can find other information from sources that you already know have a good reputation on the same topic. Like this is lateral reading, right? As opposed to vertical reading, which is like just looking at the source itself and looking at identifiers within the source for its own, you know, whether or not it's credible or not, right? And the problem that we're facing right now is now that Google has those AI summaries at the top of results, like you could tell a student, okay, like I want you to go look up who this think tank is or who this special interest group is that put out this information. And then if they open up a tab and they Google them, the AI summary will now just basically be from that website's about page. So the about page, of course, is just telling a really fantastic story about what they are and who they are. And what you really want is sort of like a more neutral third party, like a Wikipedia, that will tell you like, oh, this is what their ideological perspective is. And so now even this method that we're teaching students, which is lateral reading, is sort of becoming corrupted by this artificial intelligence, you know, summary thing that Google is now doing. So we're just constantly having to kind of keep up with like the latest. Like we didn't even have to do this a year and a half ago. And now it's like a constant, like I feel like every time we teach, we're having to kind of add another layer. And so, I mean, it's a good thing, I think, from a professional perspective, keeps us on our toes, but there is a lot to AI literacy.
To go back to our conversation about reading, to re-embrace slow because reflection is how we learn. Reflection is how we learn. So this is the thing about audio too, is I don't have time to reflect. Like they're moving on. They're moving on. They're moving on. Like I need to stop. When I'm reading, I can go at my own pace. So if there's a really interesting sentence, I stop and I think, or I go back and then I come forward, and you move at different paces. And I want my students to be slow and reflective, and they're so trying to cram so much stuff in, they aren't actually learning. And so I think AI, if that's your mentality of how can I cram more in and be more and more efficient, AI is like a drug. It's going to be a drug. And I'm worried about that. So I'm not sure we should, even though I love AI, but I don't know, especially for young people, like I think I can be maybe a little, if I'm having trouble with it, but I can be a little disciplined. I don't know if an 18-year-old can be disciplined enough to say, I could do this in half an hour, or I could do this in 2.5 hours.
Writing is a mode of thinking. You know, like sometimes I think people have the impression that writing is sort of a record of your thinking or what's going on, interior states. But in my experience, and I think there are people who take this position in research that suggests it, that there's something about the act of writing that kind of is thinking itself. It sort of shows you what you think. And so that involves some difficulties, you know, like whether it's sitting in front of a blank page or a blank screen. But from my perspective, there's something about really taking on that difficulty that I think is beneficial for people because it helps them to think.
Because to my mind, I think no matter what we do, whether we're training our bodies or training our brains, the learning is the friction, right? The hard part where you feel that sense of like, oh man, I've got to integrate this knowledge now. I'm writing a paper, getting that product. That's not the reason you write a paper, right? The reason you write the paper is to synthesize knowledge and think about organization and train your brain to think in an organized manner. And that is a good skill to carry forward.
But I just think the trouble is when the incentives in much of higher education have students thinking about, you know, I need to get grades, I need to get this credential so that for later, you know, they think very instrumentally, some students at least, about education. It's just when it comes down to it and the pressure is on and you can just have Chat do this thing for you, all the understanding about how this might not be great for you long term, even medium term, might just fall aside in the, you know, the weight of that. Yeah. And it snowballs, right? Yeah. Like think about reading. I'm just as concerned, at least as concerned about students actually reading as I am about them actually writing. And if you outsource that stuff earlier on, you know, your intellectual abilities either weaken or they just don't develop. And that makes it harder later on to do the stuff, which makes the pressure to use these tools as a shortcut grow even more. So that's what I mean by it snowballs. Yeah.
I don't think AI makes us that much dumber. People worried about that with Google, that because you could Google anything now, you didn't have to remember it, and my feeling is that it's actually made people much smarter on a broader level. Okay. Maybe they are only going equally deep as they were before, maybe slightly less deep, you could argue, but it was more than made up for by the fact that they're learning things from all different sources as a result of Google.
Protecting that struggle doesn't mean banning the technology. It means redesigning the entire experience. We're moving from a world of policing to a world of partnering, where the classroom becomes a laboratory for wargaming real-world projects with AI.
I couldn't agree more. We have to use these new tools to expand our abilities. To show us how this works, we hear from Chris Sheridan, Sarah Parsons, Betsy Barry, Fred Salisbury, Elizabeth Ricks, Jed McCosco, Shannon McKean, and Jeff Teague. They share incredible strategies, like using a stoplight model for ethical AI use or employing AI as an objective grading partner to ensure that every student gets a fair and thorough first pass. It's about transforming the teacher from a sage on the stage to a high-performance coach who motivates students to reach their full potential.
So what we ended up doing is I ended up mapping out the documentary film process from beginning to end, right? So there's the research piece of it, there's the shooting piece of it, there's the editing piece of it, and then there's the distribution piece of it. And so I list kind of all the tasks in each place, and I asked William to think about where AI could be used in each of those steps to complete or help with each of those tasks that I had laid out. And then we decided we would do it like a stoplight. We would give it a red, yellow, green. So green means, hey, this is a great use of AI. There's no ethical qualms here. Go for it. This is really smart. It can be really efficient. It can save you time. Yellow was either I can see why you want to do it, but be careful, or the technology can get you so far, but know its limitations. And then red was just don't do it, right? And just this gets you into trouble really fast. And so it's been a really dynamic lecture because I present the documentary piece of it, and then we pause, and then William is on another computer monitor, and he's actually bringing up the tools, and we're wargaming what some of the students' actual projects are. And so what we said to them at the beginning is, I want you to leave here more thoughtful and more confident about using AI in the right ways. And I also want you I want you to know how easily it can get you into trouble. But I don't want to scare you away from it.
What I'm finding is I need to use class time, not for lecturing, but instead for giving them problems to struggle in class where they see that they can ask me for help.
Yeah.
They can use AI if they want, but having their peers around, having me there, having our TA, right, having people around that can help them through that struggle, it allows them to build those cognitive skills and also to see, I can do this and I don't have to rely on AI. And so after class, then they feel more comfortable struggling with it. And of course, yes, AI is still there. They can use it anytime. But I think the struggle needs to happen in class. I need to be there to help them through that struggle, to almost normalize it, make it like, this is what this class is about, and this is okay. And it's super exciting when you get it right. When you work through that struggle and you build those neurons, if you will, or those those synapses, right? Yeah. So I think, again, the structure of, at least for me, my classes, it's got to transform even more. I'm trying to make these changes.
I think it seems, to me at least, it's pretty obvious that there are some things that we want students to learn how to do on their own. If that's the case, we have to be able to assess whether they can do it on their own. And so we have to do that, I think, in person right now is the only real solution to that. And in person in a variety of ways. So it could be oral exams, it could be the blue book test. Yeah. And I mean, there are downsides to this. I want to be clear, because a lot of people early on will say, but that's bad because of, for accessibility reasons, or students who don't test well. Like, we were so glad to get away from that in higher ed, and now we're going back to that. And so I don't disagree with that. But I think it's even worse if we don't actually assess students' actual independent learning and abilities. So we need some way to actually be able to assess their learning and their abilities. And so I think oral exams, blue books, oral exams only possible for tiny classes because there's only so much time. So I think the problem is, and this is why I say it's crisis, is that there are some things that we want students to learn that cannot be assessed in 1 hour or an hour and a half, that take a week.
Most of my teaching is at one of three levels, primarily the 200, the 262, and also a computational lab that goes with half of it. Occasionally at the 100 level, as every other year. Then I do sort of, these couple lectures, which have now become actually lectures on AI in topics of biology. And so it kind of depends. So for topics in cancer biology, I'm just going to keep updating with the latest advances. It's like, because one lecture is basically on generative AI and structure prediction and drug discovery. That's going to change. Another lecture is on how to use AI to help write. Actually, by writing in this case, it means getting source materials, not actually putting things on, but getting information. Okay, and that's that's actually really more up at the business levels. These students have gone through college. They've got, supposedly if they're in grad school, they've got a good sense of being able to evaluate things. They've got a good background. Now it gets to be like, okay, how can we actually use generative AI in a productivity enhancing way? For the 200 level classes, that's going to be more. That's something 100 and 200 levels, I think I need to think more, but for different reasons.
So I think it is valuable for students to learn how to, on their own, go through the whole process of writing a paper that might take 2 weeks. That's something that completely on their own. I think it's valuable for students to learn how to do all of that on their own. Now, we could have an interesting argument about why I think that's the case. But I can't assess that in-class writing. Because I want to see them revise. I want them to learn how to revise, how to work with their ideas, there's no way for me to do that in person unless I say, you sit in here for a week like it's a prison and we're going to have you do it. It's so artificial. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The same thing is true about reading. Reading is my biggest stress, right? My biggest stress is that I want students to learn how to read on their own. There is no way I guess I could just have them read in class. And I'm going to start doing that actually, I think in the fall, doing some in-class reading.
I have played around with it with grading. We talked about this a little bit in our pre-call. I think this one could be a little controversial, but I think that there is a tremendous benefit to using AI as a grading partner. The way that I use it is mostly for written assignments. I will have it look at everybody's students or all of my students at once, like as a first pass. And the benefit of doing that is AI is not like me. It does not get tired. It is not biased towards certain students like I am, both in good ways and bad ways. Yeah, like it is actually way more objective than I am. And it grades everybody the exact same way. Now, what I do after I have it run through its first pass is I adjust from there. Sometimes I think it's
how do you prompt it to do that first pass?
So I actually give it my rubric. So I upload the rubric and I give it some context about, this is a introductory business analytics class for an MBA program in a 4-year institution. I mean, you can really give it a ton of context. Like these students are in their first and saying these students need to be expected to, do whatever for this particular audience. So they're going to be doing this analysis for a marketing audience. So, grade that as if you are a marketing executive, basically, is what I say. So it's not grading it as me, it's grading it as the ultimate who they're doing analysis for. So that's my first pass. Yeah.
That's
and then I give it my rubric
and then you go through with the second pass, right?
I go through with the second pass. I look at what it says. Sometimes I think it's a little too harsh. Sometimes I don't think it's hard enough. So I adjust it from there. I would say generally we're kind of aligned. We're pretty much, me and ChatGPT are similar. But I write all of the feedback myself because I don't like the way that it writes feedback. And to me, it doesn't sound authentic. It doesn't sound natural. And I also think I miss an opportunity to give feedback and learn my students and learn who they are and what they're good at if I don't write it myself.
Well, my value has remained constant from before AI. And what I've always seen as what I give the students is like what a coach gives to athletes. There's a sense where you go to your coach to say, okay, help me with my, my swing here, help me with my stroke, whatever, help me with the technique of the sport. And I certainly do that when people come to my office hours, when people raise their hand in class and say, I'm not getting this, I'm helping them with the technique that they need to know. But 99% of what a coach does for an athlete is help them to achieve their potential by keeping them motivated and on target where their energies are being poured into what they need to pour them into. And if I provide value to students, it's because that they don't just get somebody who can give them the information and correct their mistakes and maybe point out where their quote unquote technique is wrong, and how to do correct technique, but to motivate them, to give them a reason to keep pushing harder so that they get to their full potential.
For the 100 level, yes, there's going to be some of combating what I will say is cheating, combating using it when they really aren't ready to do it. I'm not entirely sure how to do that, frankly. One thought is to reduce the importance of homework. There's always been an issue with students in intro classes, looking up homework assignments. Though, on the other hand, the way I've been doing it for quite a few years now is, are these, I forget the word for them, but they're ones where there's two different types. There's assignments where basically they're adaptive, like, so, they get something wrong. Okay, well, you get another problem that kind of drills down from what you got wrong. Or there are problems where you basically get almost as many opportunities as you want before you finally work it out. So that, I think, gives the student less incentive to cheat, because they're actually, they don't have sort of a single, like, oh, I put this in, I get a wrong answer. If they put the time into it, they will get 100% on their homework. Okay.
So I'm fortunate because most of my teaching load is in an experiential learning course. And in those courses, it's more about students applying what they know and then dealing with the ambiguity that's present in experiential learning courses and trying to find a way through using not only what they've learned in the classroom, but also kind of the human skills we all need to develop: project planning, working with teams, managing expectations, and all that. So it's less about making sure they know the content, it's kind of helping them find a way through. And AI can be a real accelerator for that. And so I am a strong proponent. I encourage my students to use it. I tell them that very candidly that my expectations of what they can do have gone up. And so the submission for an assignment that's part of the process that might have been an A 5 years ago might be a B now, because I expect that much more from them, because I expect them to use AI.
Just keep on your safety hat, your security hat, and your data hat when you're using with the tools. Don't use it to cheat. Don't use it to, what I mean by that is it's serious, because we have cases where we have to investigate individuals who use AI inappropriately in a classroom setting, and an approved investigation. But use AI to research, evaluate, make your life more efficient.
As we look ahead, the educational landscape is shifting. It's no longer just about content delivery. Content delivery has become ubiquitous. It's about helping students navigate a world of constant change and finding their true purpose. We are entering a transparent experimentation model where professors and students all learn to adapt together.
In our final segment, Will Fleeson, Tobias Flattery, James Prozek, Andy Chan, and Raina Hawk envision the future state of the university. They discuss how AI can actually help students discover their life's meaning, and how being a great learner is now more important than the specific major on your diploma. It's an exciting, slightly chaotic, but ultimately helpful look at an education system that prioritizes the whole person.
I think there's going to be huge changes in education. That I can say. There'll be huge changes in education. I don't know how long they'll take. It might take 2 years. It might take, the way academics go, it could be 20 years. But I think there's going to be huge changes, and the role of educators potentially is definitely going to change in some way or other. The goal of students, the goal of universities is going to change. The way students handle their classes is going to change.
But in education, I think it's kind of just chaos. I think, despite what people might say, I think we don't really know what's going to happen. I think we can know what's going to happen when any significant technology is tossed into the world, let alone something as potentially I mean, as much as the technology can be civilization altering, right, as AI, I just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that that's where we are right now. We're almost 3 years in since the, tossing of ChatGPT into the wild.
I feel like where we're at with the use of AI in education is very much a punitive model. So if a student used AI, they might be considered cheating or plagiarism or things like that. And of course, that can happen. It does happen. But what if we shifted away from a punitive model and said, instead, a more transparent experimentation model where I don't know if professors do talk to their students about how much they use AI to design, or if a student discovered that a professor's assignment was AI generated, how would that student feel about what the professor was doing? Would they feel cheated? Would they feel like, actually, I'm kind of glad to know that my professor is also using these tools? To me, the punitive way of discussing these things is clouded in mystery. It's clouded in judgment and kind of this restrictive way of trying to adapt to AI. I'm somebody who's interested in a little bit more transparent and communicate. I'm a communication studies person. I want professors to be able to communicate about how they use or don't use AI to students in a way that we can work together to experiment on it, versus just thinking that if somebody uses it, it's shameful, embarrassing, not correct, different things like that.
I'm very excited about that. My goal for my class this coming semester is that one class, the personality research, is that they are able to design a study that tells them something interesting to them about how to use AI to find purpose in your life. So that's the goal. I'm hoping by the end of the semester, they'll have designed a study that'll taught them something about how to use AI to find purpose in their lives. It's a lot of steps in that goal. So this is a class that's for seniors. It's called Personality Research. The goal of the class is for them to learn how to do research better. It's advanced research course. So they've already had 1 year of research methods, and now they're doing an advanced research class. They're going to design their own study, and I picked the topic that I want them to design a study about. So what I've decided this time it's going to be is using AI to develop purpose in your life. So we're going to spend 1 month where we're going to learn about purpose in life, meaning in life, and then they're going to use AI to discover their own purpose in life. So these are seniors in college. This is a great time for figuring out what your purpose in life is, because you've got to make some big decisions.
One of the phrases we use in our office is this idea of you're not married to your major. Because a lot of students think when they choose their major, they've actually made a decision about what career they can get into. We have so many students who, given their major, end up working areas totally different than what they studied. Because we know today, and actually this is interesting as it relates to AI, the ability to learn skills once you get out of school is really rapid, and it's actually getting faster and faster. So what's really more important is actually you are a great learner and you love doing the work of learning, and you're very curious about that. And so we wanted to make sure we help students understand that. And so we start with who are you as a person and try to then connect that and what's your purpose, and then try to connect that to how you navigate in the world, knowing that we're not only equipping you for your first job, but to navigate whatever changes might be in the future for the rest of your life.
I think we're already making this transition where professors are less about, the sage on the stage and more about helping facilitate and meeting kind of the psychic needs of motivation. So that's where I see ourselves more. I think there's going to be a flattening of this hierarchy between professor and students, right? And I think we're all going to be on the same plane, because I think we're all going to accept that in a way we're all nascent to what comes next.
Thanks again to our guest, and thanks for listening to the Deacs.AI podcast. Please continue to follow the AI discussion by subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you have any comments, questions, or would like to join the discussion, please email us at Deacs.AI@wfu.edu.